talk about preparing yourself for a relationship, ready to have a loving relationship. We're also going to be talking about how to leave the past behind. And Katherine is also going to be touching on some of her work on the conscious uncoupling process for those of you that have left or are needing to leave a relationship, because we know we have women here in all different circumstances. So Katherine, just to get us started, I'm so excited about this topic today. I'd love for you to share, if you would, just a little bit more about your own personal journey and story and how you came to do this amazing work that you do in the world.
You know, I think that I never in my wildest dreams thought I would ever be a love expert because, Michelle, like you, I struggled in this area for many years. I, too, was a first-time bride over the age of 40. And I was deeply confused about why it was so difficult for me, and I felt very resigned that it would ever happen for me. I had wanted to be a mother and had been trying to find that partnership for years. I had very destructive patterns, though. My main pattern was I tended to always seem to find myself in triangulation, some kind of triangulated situation that made the love impossible to fulfill upon. So I was a particular magnet for married men and then when I would find a person who was single and available, he tended to be addicted to alcohol or was a workaholic or had another ex-girlfriend in the background that was still captivating his heart. There was always some drama, and it was very painful. And I was deeply confused, and I was very I was left really longing for love in a way that felt cruel to me, truthfully, if I think back to it. When I was in my early 40s, the thing that really turned everything around was that I was with a group of people, and we were exploring the power of setting intentions, having kind of a support place where we were all, hearing each other's intentions, holding each other's intentions. And most of the people in the group were doing things like, I want to buy a house, or I want to double my business or double my income. But I was coming off a hurting heart, another disappointment. After 6 months of dating somebody, he invited someone else out for New Year's Eve.
Oh,
I know, it's a big ouch. So, which led to a very authentic conversation, and I realized that, he was not really available. And so that was a bottom for me. And I went to this group, I went to a friend in this group, and I said, I'm going to set a radically ridiculous intention to be engaged by my 42nd birthday, which was 8 months out, and I had no prospects for a husband, let alone a great husband. And let alone I'd been trying to do this for decades. And she said something to me, Michelle, that was very, very wise and that actually changed my life. She said, Katherine, I will hold that intention with you if you give me permission to hold you accountable for being the woman that you would need to be in order to be engaged on your 42nd birthday.
Wow.
And I will forever love her for saying that, because instead of frantically running out to try and find someone to get engaged to, it was sobering, and it kind of turned my attention inward to see how I might indeed, outside of conscious awareness, be the source of my own experience, so that rather than it's just kind of happening to me like it's just my fate to be alone in this lifetime, I became curious about how it might actually be happening through me. And I began asking myself questions that were going to help me to see clearly how I was showing up, who I was being, where I was centered inside of myself that was generating this constant experience of disappointment in love. Now, by the way, I was already a psychotherapist at this point. So I already knew my issues backwards and forwards, upside down. Every rock had been looked under, and, there was nothing that I didn't know. All of my wounds, I kind of know where they came from. I knew my issues. I knew my codependency, all of that stuff, my love addiction. But it wasn't until I say, okay, specifically, what part of me doesn't actually want a relationship.
Mm.
And what's the logic of that? Like, what part of me am I trying to protect? And what's the belief that's underneath that impulse? Or what's driving me to give my power away to other people? Or how do I really feel about myself and my own worthiness to receive love? So every morning I'd sit on the meditation cushion and I'd kind of reflect in my journal, and I'd ask the universe. And, you know, we all know about visioning too. So what you do is you claim a future, and you begin to kind of collapse time. You feel into, what does it feel like in my body to have that? You know, and then you use your senses. Just imagine what his hair smells like after he gets out of the shower, or, you know, you smell the dinner that he's preparing in the kitchen, or you imagine being in bed and, you know, feeling his cold feet cuddle up to yours. You know, you put it in the body. And then I asked the question, what would I need to give up in order to manifest this love? What beliefs do I need to give up? What old agreements am I still playing out? What misplaced loyalties do I still have? What toxic patterns of giving away my power, of people pleasing, of keeping my first attention on other people so that I kind of lose myself in a relationship? Would I need to let go of in order to trust myself, to create happiness in a relationship? What resentments am I still carrying? Where am I still victimized so I don't really trust myself to open my heart again, because building a wall against love, not quite learning my lessons. These were all the questions I was asking myself. What would I need to give up? And what would I need to cultivate and embrace in order to prepare myself to receive this love into my life? What new skills would I have to learn? Setting boundaries, for example, or how to speak my truth in a way that was kind of, relationship positive, as opposed to hitting people over the head with my truth, like what habits of healthy attachment do I need to begin to cultivate and form? All of these things, it was a learning curve. And because I put this time limit on it, Michelle, there was urgency. It was like, oh, this can't just be someday I'll work out my codependence issues. It better be today. Because, I need to forgive my ex-boyfriend today, because I don't want to be dragging that baggage into my next relationship. So I love the urgency that we put in when we say, this shall happen now, within 6 months, by my birthday, by next New Year's, I will have that partner. So I put in this element of urgency. Well, it's just a fact, and that we have seen time and time again, and many of us know this, that when we come with that level of devotion and commitment, the universe begins to go to extraordinary measures to meet us in that commitment.
Right.
All sorts of synchronicity starts to happen. Magic is unleashed. And that's where we come into the center of our power to create a future that is unlike anything in our past, that is a departure from any of our patterns, a departure from our woundology stories that we've been carrying into our adulthood from early childhood, even a departure from the wounds that have passed through generations in our family. And suddenly, everything is possible. So the synchronicity that happened to me is, as I'm sitting on the cushion, I have this image of the man I used to date 6 years before, who I'd completely blown it with. He was a lovely, beautiful man, and I was dating someone else at the time. And, so my pattern was either they were unavailable or I was unavailable. So in that time, I was unavailable, and I created drama instead of love, and he left. And here I am on the meditation cushion. Now, pretty much everything that I'm getting, where I have an idea, I have a thought, I should do this, I should do that, I'm acting on it. This one, call this man, I did not act on because I was a little shy.
Yeah.
And I ignored the impulse. 2 weeks later, Michelle, I went to a church service where I had been attending church for many years, I think 10 years. I'd never seen this man there. There he is across the parking lot for the first time in 10 years. And instead of walking up to him with courage and reconnecting, I turned away. I walked the other direction because I felt shy. And by the time I gathered my courage, he was gone.
Oh.
I know. So this is 17 years ago, all this is happening. 2 weeks after that, I'm complaining to a girlfriend, and she says, you have got to get online. Now, 17 years ago, nobody was doing what we're doing.
Right.
It was just of it. No, the technology did not exist for people to even put their pictures up online. So it was like one step above the personal ads. I don't remember the personal ads, but I remember them when I was a kid in the back of the local newspaper, the Lonely Hearts Club kind of. It was another kind of like little pathetic element to it. So I didn't want to do it, but I'm coachable. I'm in this commitment. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. So I log onto this site. There are 250,000 people on the site. I put in a few stats, like I was a non-smoker. I wanted someone who wanted children, those kinds of simple things. 80 potential matches came up in my area. I chose one person to respond to with no picture, no name. And when he wrote me back the next day, back then you could just write into someone's personal email account if you wrote back. His name was in parentheses, and it was Mark. It was the man who I had dated 6 years earlier, and just the truth.
Well, that's amazing.
I didn't make it mean that he was the one, but when we were out having coffee, it was clear to me that he was answered prayer, and we were indeed engaged by my 42nd birthday and married the next year. And then I gave birth to our daughter when I was 43. So calling in the one is documenting that process. And it's kind of laying out the step-by-step process, because after I did it, I said, oh, wow, that was pulling out of a hat. That was a miracle. How can I help others to have a miracle in love? And that's the genesis of the calling in the one process. And it has since gone on to help tens of thousands of people to duplicate that miracle that I was able to create. Now, Conscious Uncoupling, my other baby, I want you to know, I think of it as the precursor to calling in the one.
Okay.
Because working with so many women, one of those inner obstacles to love, like when you're sitting on the cushion in the couch, and you're looking at agreements, and you're looking at resentments, and you're looking at kind of toxic patterns, one of the things that comes up for us are the agreement that we made to a former love. I'll never love anyone more than I love you, or the hope of, the hope that relationship will come back, or the resentment that you're still struggling with and festering with, this incompletion from the past, or the way that you were left feeling even worse about yourself in the aftermath of that relationship, and the meaning that you made, and the kind of wounding that it is to your sense of self. Because I think breakups can be a great insult to our self-sense.
Yeah.
And so many of those things. So when we're talking about getting ready for our love, part of the work is to have a conscious completion, because our next relationship will not begin with the next person that we meet. It will not begin on that day. It will begin with how we complete the relationship that meant a lot to us in our past, and how we come to peace in that, how we find, learn our lessons and grow our capacity to love and be loved moving forward.
Yeah, I think this is so fascinating and really, really powerful. I was really struck with the piece you were talking about with agreements that we have made either with ourselves or with someone else, whether they were made verbally or whether they were just made inside of our minds or hearts, whether they were spoken or unspoken. They can have a powerful effect on what's happening and what's possible in the present. And they can have a powerful block toward allowing us to move forward if they're not cleared. And I think sometimes we're aware of them and sometimes we're not. But what I love about your work, both in Calling in the One and Conscious Uncoupling, is you're helping us really do that inner work that makes the things that we want possible. So say a little bit more about agreement and this process of completion. I would love to hear a little bit more about that, and I know many of our listeners would as well.
I love that you're picking up on this because we don't talk about agreements enough. The agreements that we make, Michelle, serve as intentions that we have set. And they will influence our actions and choices for many, many years to come, even long after we forget the original agreement. So we make agreements on a covert level, very often not even spoken out loud, to people like our sister who's going to be, we let her be the beautiful one and we'll be the smart one, or I'm never going to be happier in love than my mother was, or I'll never love another man more than I love my daddy. So we do that because we love these people. We want to take care of these people. And in our young mind, because we usually make these decisions when we're quite young, that's our way to demonstrate our love and think that if we align with our mother's unhappiness, she won't be so alone in it. Mm-hmm. And we can become quite loyal and begin to dim down our chances and opportunities for love. And we might not even be conscious that we made that agreement. Other agreements are the kinds of agreements that we make to ourselves when we have a hurting heart. If I have my heart broken, I might decide I am never, ever, ever going to let myself get this hurt again.
Right.
I will never be vulnerable again. And so we build a wall. And, we are defended, and we have a defended heart. We have a heart that's, got a little bit of barbed wire around it that creates a lot of problems in our relationships moving forward. Of course, there's always the agreements that we make with someone else. I had one woman who was beautiful woman, absolutely stunning, so well dressed, so attractive in her late 40s. And she hadn't had a date in 10 years and was so deeply confused since her marriage had ended and felt kind of, embarrassed that was happening while her friends were dating. And it just never came up. And we tracked it back to her wedding vows. She got married in the Catholic Church. And when she took her vow to her husband, she really felt like she was taking it to God. So she had this vow to God of fidelity to the man who was her husband. Now, he had since gone on and been in another marriage and created children in that marriage. And they hadn't spoken in years, but here she was, staying true to that promise that she made on the altar before family and friends, and most of all for her, before God. So she actually was wonderful. When she saw that, it was a big light bulb. She called him up. She hadn't talked to him in years, and she said, I know this is really crazy, but I have to tell you, I'm not going to keep my vow of fidelity to you anymore. And they had a really sweet kind of connection about it. And she started dating after that. That was what she needed to do. So the element of that is to recognize that it's not just seeing the agreement, it's renegotiating the agreement. And sometimes that means picking up your mom and you just say, I know this is crazy, Mom, but when you were going through that divorce when I was 7, I just decided that I was never going to, I just was, my heart was broken for you, and I decided I was never going to be happier in love than you. And here I am, 47 and never married. And I can see that I did that. And isn't that crazy? Because I know that you would want me to be happy in love. And I'm so, I'm just calling to complete that with you. And you'll have a sweet heart to heart, and you'll get her blessing. Or sometimes these things can't be spoken out loud to another person. I realized when I was doing this, and I share it in the Calling in the One book, I talk about my high school boyfriend, Frank. We were, boyfriend and girlfriend all through high school. I loved him madly, but we definitely had different paths to take after high school. And we were not destined to be together, but I was heartbroken about it. So I said this crazy thing. And I said, why don't we go in our separate ways now, and we'll make our life decisions. And then when we're in our 60s, we'll come back together and we'll get married then. And now he didn't listen to that at all, because he went off and married somebody else the next year. And, got a family, started a family. And by the time he was in his 20s, had 3 children and this beautiful wife. And me, I was, I'd been dreaming about him for years. It was very incomplete. It was very traumatic for me, the way that we ended things. And I realized when I was doing the Calling in the One process that I was still keeping that agreement. Wow. That on some level I was waiting for our reconciliation. I wanted to be single. so that when we, came back together, I would be ready for him. So I didn't want to call him all these years later and disrupt his marriage and family. So I did what I call a soul-to-soul meditation, which you can do. You close your eyes and take a deep breath, and you imagine that you could bring in the essence of the person you're incomplete with, invite them to take a seat in front of you, and you have a heart-to-heart conversation. You thank them for what they gave to you. You acknowledge the gifts of the relationship, and then you tell them that you can no longer keep that agreement with them. And you renegotiate. My new agreement is to set you free, to bless your life, to set myself free so that I can be free to love another person. And then and it's almost like ritualistic or ceremonial, and you release the person. And truthfully, it was after I did that release, Michelle, that I met Mark, and for this magical reconciliation that we had and reunion. It wasn't really reconciliation, but this magical reunion that we had, because in some ways I just wasn't really free. So we want to, see the agreements, make it conscious, and release ourselves from being anchored in the past. Most of us don't have enough of ourselves in present time to cause the miracle of love. So it's very important that we complete the past and we become ready and available to the future that's calling to us.
So powerful. I think one of the main agreements that I often see observe women making, with whether they realize it or not, is one you spoke about, where we get hurt. And I did this for a time myself too. And so we build what we believe is a protection around our hearts, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously. And we believe this is going to protect us from getting hurt. But what actually happens is it becomes a barrier and a block to the intimacy and love that we most deeply desire. And I wonder if you can speak to this a little bit, because I think almost all of us, we don't make it to, our 40s, 50s, unless we've been living in a bubble and beyond, unless we've been living in a bubble without having a few nicks and dents and owies in our heart, right?
So when we build that wall, it's really because we have not yet seen our own part in how things went down. If you're in an abusive relationship, or if you're in a relationship, let's say, where somebody cheats on you, lies to you, and cheats on you, it's very easy to stay in a victimized place with that. Somebody does something egregious and hurtful and horrible. And so the normal response to that is to shut down your heart and to make it, and to step back and to kind of contract a bit to try and be safe from that kind of an emotional insult. When we are able to see, our side of things, how we may have participated in that, in some unconscious way, or even, I like to say, even if it's 97% the other person's fault, you want to look at your 3%. I didn't ask the right questions. I knew there was something off, but I didn't ask the right questions because I didn't want to rock the boat. Or I dismissed my own inner knowing. I knew something was wrong, but when I asked about it, he said there wasn't. And so I never set boundaries. I never asked for what I wanted in that relationship. Or, well, I'm super abusive to myself. I lie to myself all the time. I beat myself up. I don't treat myself with respect. And I must have just, I train people to show up that way in my life. We have to see that part. And then we have to make an amends to ourselves. From this moment forward, I'm going to have the courage to ask what I need to ask, even if the other person leaves. I'm going to stay true to me. I'm going to put my own health and my own needs. I'm going to raise my expectations about what I deserve. I'm going to set those boundaries. I'm going to implement those consequences. Like from this moment forward, I will do that. And you will begin to have opportunities to do just that. You will have to make that choice because life evolves through us. A lot of times we kind of intellectually understand things, and then we think it's just going to be different. No, we have to make different choices. It comes down to how we are co-creating our lives with the universe. And if we have these patterns, we have to show up differently. So we have to make an amends to ourselves to show up differently. And that begins to restore our trust in ourselves. And we know that we will never be able to be hurt like that again because we are not the same people. We are not doormats. In Al-Anon, they have a saying, if you don't want to be a doormat anymore, then get up off the floor. So we have to find a ways to get up off the floor and to transform ourselves from the inside out. And then we're not only able to trust ourselves moving forward, but we are also more capable of forming a much healthier, happier union moving forward. And that's a little bit of the conscious uncoupling process there. That's why I say conscious uncoupling is a very good way to prepare for anyone who's struggling with a heart that's still hurting, still feeling resentful, any way that you're not trusting yourself to move forward in love and dismantle the wall so that you can truly be free to love with an open, fully healed, fully happy, healthy heart.
That was so beautiful and so powerful. I love this concept of taking the responsibility and looking at what our part was in relationships. As you said, even if you only think it's 3%, one of the things that I've noticed as I've worked with women, Katherine, and this applies here, is oftentimes I'll hear about a heartbreak or a disappointment or a breakup or a divorce, a past relationship that didn't work out, and all of the reasons why. And a lot of times there's a lot of blaming going on in that initial conversation. And I'll often ask the question, looking back on it in retrospect, of course, we all know hindsight is 20/20. Were there any feelings that you had, or were there any questions in your mind, or any intuition that this might not work out, or that there might be some issues here? And in almost every case, the women will say, yes, looking back on it, some of the things you talked about, I suppressed some of my inner intuition or had some concerns, but I pushed them aside, or I gave him just the benefit of the doubt over certain things that maybe I shouldn't have. And one woman actually said, this is really funny, Katherine, you'll probably get a kick out of this. One woman actually said, well, actually, looking back on it, there were more red flags than in the Chinese Communist parade, which I thought was a very funny and descriptive way to say it. But I love that. And why I think that's so powerful is that it allows you to make new agreements with yourself and to express your needs, desires, and wants with courage, like you said, Katherine, even if that means that other person goes away. Because better to know earlier on than before you've invested years of your life into something, right?
Absolutely. And I think, Michelle, one of the places we get stopped in seeing our 3% clearly is that we have a tendency when we're hurting and when we go to self-reflect, that we will beat ourselves up. So we might ask ourselves the question, what is wrong with me? How could I be so stupid? None of these questions are not going to lead to growth and evolution. And you have to notice the questions that you're asking yourself and ask questions that are going to empower you to grow. And if you go back to some of the things I was modeling before in the Calling in the One process, where I was saying, how have I been giving my power away? What can I do to reclaim it? What part of me is not interested in being in a relationship and is invested in dramas that kind of blow things up at the last minute, so that, I feel I get to go back to my home base of being alone, and because on some level, it feels safe. So we have to take responsibility for our part in things, and ask ourselves these questions in a way that's going to lead us to integrate these parts of ourselves, make new agreements with ourselves, learn the missing skills, and the new. If I don't know how to set boundaries, then I might always create drama. So it's good probably to know that and say, well, maybe I could learn how to set a boundary. There's probably 1,000 books on setting boundaries, or you go onto YouTube and listen to people talk about boundary setting. You can probably learn that. And I think that we forget that we can learn these things and put ourselves out of our misery. We can dismantle the wall to the extent that we learn how to create health, how to keep ourselves safe in appropriate ways. And this is really the learning curve that we're on when we're committing ourselves to creating happy, healthy love.
What I think I'm hearing you say in part is that as we gain awareness of these things, we don't look at it from a place of self-judgment or self-criticism, but more from a place of compassion and for an opportunity to have a breakthrough and learning and to empower ourselves to make choices that are going to serve us better moving forward, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a learning curve. I mean, if you really, come down to, well, what has you not tell the truth, or what has you not set boundaries? I mean, a lot of times it's, well, I don't really know how to do that well. So I just want to encourage all of us to remember that we are ever evolving creatures, ever emergent, and we want to, going back to the very beginning of the conversation, we want to become the people that we would need to be in order to be in the relationships we are committed to creating.
So, Katherine, one thing that I just think would be valuable is for you've touched on this a little bit, but I'd love for you to expand a little bit more on why the way we leave a past relationship is so important and how that can set us up, so to speak, for lack of a better way to say it, for a new relationship. I would just love to hear a little bit more about that because I think it would be so valuable to our audience.
Thank you. Breakups are a crossroads. And if we stay in a victimized place and we allow ourselves to just kind of cultivate a story that somebody wronged us or life is unfair to us, or we even get victimized by our own past and our own limitations, what will happen is our lives will get contracted and smaller, and we will live a lesser life in the aftermath of heartbreak. But the opportunity of a breakup is to do just the opposite, which is to allow our hearts to break open and go back to the very root of the pattern. Because it's almost like when we have a hurting heart, life has us upside down and is kind of shaking every lie out of every pocket and crevice. So every way we've dimmed down, or every people-pleasing habit, or every ways we've diminished ourselves in relationship or settled for less, it's all up for grabs. And so the opportunity of a breakup, the third step in a conscious uncoupling is called break the pattern, heal your heart. And it's to look at how relationships go for us. And if we really track the story back, far enough, we're going to see that there was an original thing that happened in our childhoods. I call it your source fracture wound. Maybe your father abandoned the family, or your mother was continually critical or negligent. And we formed kind of an idea about ourselves and have been generating life from that center ever since. We're so broken open in the aftermath of lost love that we actually get to graduate from this story. We can see it clearly. We can begin to see how we ourselves have been covertly colluding in the creation of evidence of that story. And we can claim a deeper truth about our true value and our true power to create happiness and love, deep health in partnership moving forward, and begin to cultivate the new ways of relating and the new skills in order to have that happen. That's really the conscious uncoupling process. It goes very, very deep, and it can recalibrate us and set us up to be so much happier and healthier in love moving forward. And that's why I wrote the book, and I just love the process so much. It's been very, very life-altering and life-saving for those who are struggling with an incompletion.
Potentially breaking up with someone, if you have had a relationship in your past, a divorce or a breakup, that's still causing you pain or heartache, or is still part of that inner dialogue that's operating consciously or subconsciously, it could be incredibly valuable to still go through that process, because I believe we can still need to uncouple from people we broke up with a long time ago based on those agreements that we might have made, or based upon residual resentment, anger, pain, or whatever might still be there, right?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you mentioning that, because I've had many people do the conscious uncoupling process who have been out of relationships for many years.
Yeah.
Decades. Actually, I've had someone do it recently who got in touch with me. She had been single for 20 years. And until she did the conscious uncoupling process, she didn't really have access to being able to really liberate herself, to trust herself in love moving forward. So now she's open and she's free and she's meeting men and she's feeling good and she's feeling positive about her potential for love moving forward. So, a lot of times we will, if we don't properly heal our heart, we will live with what psychologists call complicated grief. And that complicated grief is grief that's not really worked through, and it will cause us to move forward in life with a heart that's a little bit defended, a little bit closed off, too easily bruised, kind of rejection sensitive, all of these things that we can live with for many years because we have not properly healed that break. I like to tell people we would never just let our broken leg heal of its own accord, and nor do we want our broken heart to heal of its own accord, unless you don't mind your heart healing a little bit crooked and a little bit closed, because that's the heart's equivalent of walking with a limp for the rest of your life. So the conscious uncoupling process is kind of, addresses people at all levels of a breakup, and works really wherever you are in the process.
Yeah, and I absolutely resonate with what you said, that it could be a really powerful precursor to the calling in the one work. So I also just want to give you a chance, Katherine, to share with us just the last parting thought or piece of wisdom, whatever is coming forward for you that you would like to leave this audience with.
Well, I just want to encourage people to remember that the future is not dependent upon the past. So no matter what you've been through in your past, the future is actually dependent upon the choices that you're making right now, and the decisions that you're making, and the intentions that you're setting. So your future is dependent upon this moment. And I just want to send a deep blessing to the intentions of our listeners or watchers or observers or participants, let's say participants, that I want you to know, I'm going to speak directly to you. I want you to know that we are here standing with you and for you, that this whole event is devoted to you having a huge breakthrough, and we know that it's possible for you.
Thank you so much. I felt the love behind your blessing there, Katherine, and I've just loved our conversation today. It's been really lovely, and I thank you for sharing so generously from your heart and of your work. And we also, Katherine and I, both also want to acknowledge and appreciate each of you for being here with us, because obviously the fact that you're here is a compliment to your desire to have an amazing life and to experience wonderful love in your life. And so we're sending you lots of love and blessings. Bye-bye for now.